So the next little piece that you've probably heard the word used talking about computers before, and we're going to try to take some of the mystery out of it here, is going to be registers. That's what this little chip here is. We'll go over to the board and talk about it here in a second. So just quickly looking at the circuit today, using an Arduino Nano to control everything, and notice there's only 3 wires coming out of the controller. So with these 3 wires, I'm controlling 8 bits at a time basically. And to display it, have this little LED indicator over here, just a little box, 10 LEDs on it. Each one's separate, so these 8 little wires are coming out of bringing bits out of the register to either turn on LEDs or off. And that's the basic idea of the circuit. Got 3 wires controlling it. We'll use those wires to dump some bits into the register and then bring it out. So first off, the short answer, basically a register is just a place to hold bits. Which, let's talk about that a little bit more, but that's basically all it is it's a place to hold our bits. So let's go over the board and talk about that, and then we'll come back and look at this circuit and see what it's actually doing. Talking about registers here. So like I said, it's kind of just a place to store bits. Let's start with an analogy here. Say we've got, let's talk about a water line. That's a good thing that's easy to visualize. We got some water flowing down the pipe. Maybe we need to water our garden and have one hose coming out, spraying water over this garden, but maybe we have 4 different rows in the garden. And we can sit there with the hose, water this line, we're finished, come back, irrigate this row, this row, finally irrigate the last row. Or we can set up some little device to kind of handle it all at once. Quick, easy one might be we stick a bucket, and then that bucket has 4 hoses running out of it. 2, 3, 4. So then when we go over to their house, over by the house, turn the spigot on, the water's going to flow into the bucket. It flows from the spigot down one single line and fills up the bucket. And then from the bucket, it splits off into these 4 different hoses, and each one irrigates that row in the garden simultaneously. So we irrigate all the rows at once. And the register's kind of doing the same thing. Have some technical terms to work in here as well. But that's one way I like to kind of visualize what's going on with it. So the machine, we're going to have this single line coming out of the machine, right? We have some sort of device there, and it has an output line. And flowing down that output line, we're going to have a bunch of bits. Our data's coming down there, coming down that line, 1 bit at a time in single file. So that's called serial communication, where the bits just come down in single file. And we can process through that. We just need to set up a clock so that we know how far apart each bit is, and then we just, to make the math easy, let's say millisecond. So we know there's a bit coming every millisecond, which that's a super slow computer, but every millisecond we know we have another bit. So we just set up whatever's receiving this, so that after 1 millisecond it knows there's a bit there, so it looks. Then it waits a millisecond and looks at what's coming next. Then it waits a millisecond, looks at what's coming next. And that they're just coming down in single file, and we set up a clock. Registers kind of convert that serial communication into what we would call parallel communication. How many did I draw there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So then instead of one single line, we can set it up so that all our bits go feed in here, and then each bit will come out on its own line. So then instead of having to set up a clock to tell what the next bit is, we can tell what the next bit is based on which line it's on. That's kind of the idea of what a register is. It's just holding the bits and switching from serial communication into parallel communication. So both of them have their advantages. Obviously, there's a lot of wires to keep track of here, but we know what that is a lot better. If we can do it all on one wire, that's a whole lot easier to hook up. They have different advantages, and in modern machines, we're typically going to use them both. It's not like we're going to sit down and think, okay, this machine's going to be all serial communication, and this other machine's going to be all parallel communication. They're intermingled. But that's kind of what a register's doing. I like this analogy. Just think of like filling a bucket up with bits and then sending them out on their own thing afterwards. So it's a place to hold bits in a nice organized format so we can keep track of it. So let's look at the register I'm going to use for the example today. If I hold it up here, will the words show up very clear? Not really. So this is Texas Instruments. You can probably see the logo there. 74HC595. Just a basic shift register is what I'm going to go over. And kind of went over that little explanation there, an analogy, but never quite sure how far people are going to take this stuff. So I'm going to go a little bit further, talk about this chip, the chip we're using for the example, and try to be brief yet thorough, I suppose. This video is being made with the SDEV 120 class, Introduction to Logic in mind, which everybody has to take. The server administrator people, the software development people, the cybersecurity people, all the degrees at school here have to take SDEV 120, and I have no idea how far you're going to go with this, so I want to be thorough yet kind of brief. So the chip itself that we're going to use for this example, the register, is basically a normal little shaped IC circuit, and we have 8 pins down each side. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those aren't very lined up. Sorry, let me redraw that. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, light up a little bit better that way. So it's an electric thing, so obviously we're going to need some voltage coming in to power it. So our power is coming in up there, and down here we'll have, and goes out to the ground. Like I said, it's a register, it's a place to hold bits. So this particular one holds 8 bits. So that's this one, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's where it holds our 8 bits. And then we have another one here, so I'll just put the word carry down on this bit. So that's where we would connect to another register if we would need a 16-bit register instead of an 8-bit. Then there are really 3 pins that concern us. There's a serial pin. Let's see, this is going to be enable. So in enable, to turn it on and off, clear. A pin to clear it, and I'm not really using these in the example because, well, clearing is really easy to do in the code for a brief example like this. So I just ignored that and I just set the enable so that in the example it's always going to be enabled. But we can turn it on and off so that we either can or can't write to the register and just hold the stuff. We can automatically clear what's in there. And then we have two clock lines. So our CLK, which is the storage clock, and SR CLK, which is the shift clock. And that's kind of how it works. So how this works, so most of these are just holding for places to hold bits. So we send a bit on the serial port, either a 1 or a 0, an on or an off, basically. And we'll put a 1, say a 1 on the serial port, and then we run our shift clock high. Then we trigger our shift clock, because we could alternate that. Some registers have it low. But we'll do something to trigger the shift clock. And that takes what's in the serial port and moves it on to bit 0. And then what was in bit 0 moves to bit 1, what was in bit 1 moves to bit 2. I think you can kind of see where that's going, and it goes all the way through. So the bits just kind of flow in one at a time, fill in their spots. And that's where the carry comes in, because once all 8 bits are filled up, if we send in another bit, it discards it out this, so that if we needed another register, we just bring the carry bit into bit 0 or another register, and then that builds up, if we use an identical one, that would build us up to a 16-bit register really quick, instead of 8 bits. But we'll just send the bits in one at a time, and then they just cycle through each one of these. And whenever we hit the shift clock, the shift register clock, that takes what's on the serial port, moves it to 0, 0 moves to 1, 1 moves to 2, 2 moves to 3, everything just shifts down a bit. And we can load in all our data that way. So in the example, basically I just trigger the shift clock 8 times. So I figure out what the 8 bits are going to be for the example. Maybe 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that. Some byte of data. And then I'll loop through that, and each pass of the loop, the next bit gets wrote to the serial port, and the shift clock goes high so that it moves those 8 bits into this position. So then that would look like 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0. It just moves each one into a bit, and then when we hit the R clock, the storage clock, that just, whatever bits are in those spots, output all at once. So whenever this pin triggers, all of these bits go out. So very brief there. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. That's kind of how this works. We just send data down a serial line, keep hitting the shift clock until all our bits are filled. Then we hit the storage clock and send all those bits out at once. Is basically where the register is. Well, like I said, we have a byte of data. This is going to hold it and send it all out at once instead of sequentially down the line. And our technical terms for that are going to be serial and parallel. Let's go back over and look at this thing in action. Okay, so how does that stuff that I just put on the board relate to what's going on this circuit? So first off, here's our voltage coming in to power the pin. And then obviously a circuit has to form a complete loop, so here's dropping back to ground. And then I mentioned the enable and clear. So here the yellow wire is enabling, so I just set that so that it's always going to be enabled. And same thing on clear, I just set it so that it's never going to be cleared, and I'll handle that from the code. It's very simple in the code. Just to clear it, I just load in eight zeros, and well, then the register is empty. So our control wires here, like we talked about on the board, the green wires are serial data, so that's sending bits. That's, like 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, just flowing down that control wire and loading into the register one at a time. And so it loads into bit 0. Then when the next one comes in, what's in bit 0 pushes over to 1, and the new one goes into 0. Then another one comes down, it goes into 0. What was in 1 goes to 2, and what was in 0 goes to 1. And everything shifts over like that. And if we want to hook up more than one, we have this other pin down here, which we would just run that over to bit 0 of the next register and just keep building them up from there. So that's basically all it takes to control it. We have our, like mentioned on the board, the R clock and the SR clock, so that when the SR clock goes from the SR clock triggers, it'll read the next bit in from the green wire, and after it does that 8 times, triggering the R clock, and when the R clock triggers, all 8 bits go out at once. So we have 1s and 0s ready to go down the green wire. So send, like, for example, a 1 down the green wire. Then trigger the SR clock, which is going to be the orange wire here. Trigger that, and then that 1 flows into the register. Then we'll send the next bit, maybe another 1. Then we'll send a signal down the orange wire again. That pushes the next bit into bit 0, which pushes what's in bit 0 over to bit number 1. And that's going to repeat until all 8 bits are full. And then we'll come back and send a pulse down the blue wire, which will release all 8 bits at once. So basically, just a place to store our bits. Many uses for it: for making comparisons, keeping track of the next instruction, which instruction the computer is supposed to carry out, holding our numbers as we do different steps of mathematics. Anytime we need a little place to store some things, a register is useful for that. It's also very useful for communication protocols, because instead of serial sending a byte down a single line, just one bit at a time, we can load all eight bits into a register, and then send the bits down 8 lines. Send one bit down 8 different lines instead of 8 bits down one line in single file, to get from serial to parallel communication. Just couple different uses for it, but essentially just a place to hold bits. So let's look at the code running this, and then we'll come back and look at the pattern flashing one more time. Okay, so here's the code for controlling this little circuit I made. As usual, at this level of class, I don't expect you to know what all this stuff does. I just wanted to point out a couple key points here. So you can see I set up each one of the serial line, the R clock, and the SR clock. Some other stuff, and then an array of 8 booleans. So that's just our basic true-false values. We've talked about binary things a couple times. The 1 to 0, a true or false, yes and no, on, off. Any of a way to represent binary states, which 1 and 0 are quick and easy to write, but for this example, what I wanted to point out is I used true and false everywhere. So I just loaded up 8 bits, filled this array that holds 8 things. I filled that up with a bunch of falses and trues to store the data of that particular byte. Then I load it through, scroll way down here, load it up through the serial port and basically flash in 8 bits at a time. So I load in 8 bits, and then after there's 8 bits in there, I just flash the output, the R clock, to get those 8 bits displayed on the little LED indicator. That's basically all that's going on in the code for the controller here. It looks long, but it's doing the same thing over and over and over again. So probably could have been condensed, but I just copied and pasted. So it wasn't really a lot to write either. But essentially, I just load in, fill it up, decide what the 8 bits are going to be. Then I'll put those 8 bits into the register and then display what's in the register onto the LED thing. So let's go back over and look at that circuit for a minute. One last time. So, as you can see, it's not a complicated piece. It just holds the bits. And instead of transferring bits one at a time, like machines would naturally do, it adjusts it so we can transfer bits 8 at a time. Or we can put 2 of these together and transfer them 16 at a time. Or put, 4 of them together and transfer 32 bits at a time. Probably numbers you've heard a few times with registers. And then this one is just kind of flashing this little message here. Why don't you see if you can figure out what that message is? It's ASCII code, I'll tell you that. And I'll point at the last one. That is the last one. Where ASCII code 33 is the last one. So see if you can find the message from there. Figure out what it says. Or guess. There's a good chance you'll be able to guess what it is.